Good morning. Welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm, of course, Brigid Burke, and I am the, proprietor, you would say, of Transition Life Coaching. And this is my morning coffee live stream that I like to have. I've been doing these at 6:30 a.m., but I'm noticing that more people are signing on. Like, I was probably just finishing up yesterday, close to 7, and then 10 people signed on at once. Maybe it was more than 10. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but there was a lot of people who suddenly signed on. So I think what I'm going to do today, because I haven't had any chance to advertise a time change, I thought, okay, let me just stick with the same time today. If a whole bunch of people sign on at the same time again, then what I'm going to do is just extend this beyond the 30 minutes a little bit, and then I'll probably advertise moving it from 7 to 7:30 or something like that, just to make it a little easier for people who actually do want to tune in. I'm getting a lot of good feedback on this particular thing. I've had some people say that they like it because people like to see when you're offering coaching services, people want to see who you are. And there's a ton of competition on Instagram and pretty much everywhere for these kinds of things. There's a lot of people, and everybody has their own niche about how they approach things and what they do. And mine's a little odd because I tend to deal things more with in terms of crisis and loss. Although I don't want to, that doesn't mean that my business is a gloomy one. It's actually far from it. One of the things I've talked about on my other podcast called Catonia is that it really, I was talking about the connection. They said really when one understands the role of change and loss in their life, that's the point at which you actually start to live your life. That's when life starts to become joyful. That's really the key and the secret there. So really, but again, it's from a marketing standpoint, people may look at it and go, well, I don't know if I want to deal with that. But truthfully, it's kind of like pushing your way through that actually leads you to a place where you will feel more alive. I mean, that's maybe that seems like a paradox to people, but it really isn't, because life and death are two sides of the same coin. I mean, it's not, and really, somebody did ask me over this weekend what my view on death was, what my view was on the afterlife. And I said, look, from all the work I've done over the years, not only academically, which doesn't really, academic work can tell you what people have thought over the years. It doesn't necessarily tell you what's happening. And then, of course, there's what popular culture thinks about it. And then there's what you're hearing about. People have NDEs, near-death experiences. Neurologists and neuroscientists. I saw some recent article that somebody had posted about death and the idea that the NDE, it's just really that your consciousness lasts in the brain longer than you think, and because people are associating the experience, at least some of the experiences that people are having when they die for a short period of time and then they come back. They're trying to say, oh, well, that's just what your mind thinks it's going to be, and that's what you see. That might be true to some extent, but remember, and that could be because the brain filters things. So when you're immediately trying to understand the experience of what's happening to you, you may run into a space where you're trying to process what's happening in terms of what you expect. So maybe expecting to see relatives or expecting to see, that's not impossible. That said, from what I have done with my spiritual work, and again, in ultimate scientific sense, this proves nothing, but if you want to know what my experiences are, the things that I have seen in dreams, and these are not things I've tried to solicit. A lot of the things that I work in now, I'm not working in them because I've decided this is going to be my brand. This is what's happened to me, and I go with what's happened to me. Because you resist it for a very long time, and then you realize, no, this is what I'm really supposed to be doing and talking about for whoever needs to hear it. And what I've seen in dream space, what I've seen in certain types of meditations or certain types of things that I can only describe them as trance. It's not something that I do as a regular thing, but the space, and I think I'm seeing a lot of it now too, because I feel like there's been a lot of death in my family recently, and there could be more to come. So I feel like there's a lot of that information that's coming in, but I've been shown a place that I like to equate with if you read Greek mythology, they talk about the fields of asphodel. It's like the first place that the dead come to once they enter the underworld. And it's actually, I mean, in spite of the gloomy, cavernous way that the underworld looks, it's actually a very, very beautiful place. And it's not the Elysian Fields. That's a different part of the underworld. Because the underworld also consists of Tartarus and it consists of Erebus, which are the places of gloom. At least this is Greek mythology I'm talking about. And so again, it's the idea that you're living a shadow existence. It's not the same kind of existence you would have. But you have to remember the ancients believed there were several different parts to your soul. So there were at least two. I mean, the Greeks, they talked about the eidolon and the psyche. And the psyche is kind of that substantial conscious part of you that flies away. I mean, that's where we have the idea of the soul with wings, or even these kinds of, beings of the air, that you become, that part of you is that, but part of you is what they call the eidolon, the shadow, and that's the part that goes to the underworld. And so, and really the way that's been conveyed to me is that there is a place of ancestors, and that all of us go there, or part of us goes there. It's like the memory of us that goes there. The memory of the person that we were, the imprint of the energy of what we were. And when this life ends, we're actually living on a continuum of many, many lifetimes. Sometimes people will call it a soul group. Other people might have a different conception of what that means in different places. But the soul group is one that it seems like, okay, you have many different existences going on, and it's not, we always tend to think of it in terms of time, past, present, future, but they're all happening at the same time. And some of them, as we like to say, as people I know who do Akashic will say, well, some of them are active and some of them are still inactive. That person, that life, that timeline, that lifespan, whatever it is for them, is over. And when you do soul retrieval work, which is something that I do with people now, it's where you have to identify, because they're all happening at the same time, even though you're perceiving yourself in different places and not crossing over, we do know that sometimes these timelines can cross over each other, or whether you want to call them dimensions. It's really hard to say exactly, but for whatever reason, it's like there's different versions of you happening at the same time, and sometimes they can cross over each other. And it's not always that you're the same person either. So that's really when we get into the reincarnation model, it's more that you are, you're kind of several different people at once. I don't know how else to explain it. But at one point when I was sometimes when you're going through stuff and you feel like this doesn't feel like me, you can't figure out why you may be feeling traumatized about something, or maybe why you're feeling depressed about something, and then you realize. What happens is that you realize that something's happening this may be something happening in another timeline, and somehow it's bleeding over into yours. So you may be having the feelings of somebody else. So that's where you do soul retrieval work. You take these fragments and you kind of get everybody's on their own timeline, but kind of working together. I don't know how else to explain it. And I found that when I did that work, because I have, first of all, I was skeptical of whether or not I was going to be able to do this work on my own. But I was really surprised, because after I did it, it was like, everything just changed for me in a big way. Things feel so much more solid since I've actually done it, because I was seeing that in these different strands what had happened. I don't want to get into what I saw in these other strands, but they were very, very, some of them were very traumatic. And so I had so the question is, okay, integrating that material, like how do you take all of that and integrate it? This is part of the collective, and it's hard to wrap your mind around, because again, we do think in terms of past, present, future. I was born, I'm living my life, I die, right? And it's not quite like that. So it's almost like, okay, just to sort of sum up on that, it's sort of like when you die, there's a part of you that goes to the ancestral realm. That's probably like your parents, your grandparents, whoever are coming to meet you, okay, or whatever relative, whatever, or person you love. But there's another part of you that is now blinking into awareness somewhere else. That's really what it is. Like, okay, you finished that timeline, and now it's like this. I metaphorically, I kind of liken it to what I have heard about the way molecules work in the body. and that is that things tend to blink on and off. They literally, as a friend of mine put it, you are literally blinking in and out of existence every second on a quantum level, and you can't see it. And that's not me making that up. I mean, that is something that's determined. This is another reason why I say your brain filters that out. If you were aware of exactly what was happening, I don't know how you would. I don't know how any of us would function. You know, you can't. Consciousness can't function. In order for consciousness to function, you have to be limited. It's like the paradox that in order to be free, you have to be limited in some way. Because freedom, if you have the freedom to do what you want, that means that in order for other people to have the same freedom, if you want everybody to be free, then that means there has to be some restriction. And also even for yourself. If you're too free, then you could run into a position where the excess of something might lead you to a place where you're not so free. So yeah, freedom requires restriction, and that's a weird paradox. So anyway, those were some of my thoughts on that. And my topic I really wanted to talk about today had to do with, and this is what kind of came up, things around subject of marriage and marriage relationships, inadequacy, and wounding. Okay, these are happy topics, right? So, all right. So let's talk for a minute about why this all comes up together. Now, marriage is something where people, there tends to be a view of it. It is one of the milestones, okay? A lot of times with transitions, I'm talking about job changes and stuff. I'm like, well, let's talk about that one, because that's a big one that people make. And I don't think people realize how monumental that change is. Because you could have people who live together for years and then get married, and their relationship could change on a dime overnight. Because marriage is archetypally and psychologically a whole different kind of experience. You will have people who will say, okay, yeah, we were living together, we got married, and it's just like a continuation. It's just now we have a piece of paper. I have heard that some people feel that way. But there's always some kind of a shift, because now there's a level of commitment here that depends on your relationship. And there has to be a dynamic of wanting to really work together in a space, or being able to honor the space of other people, where it's very easy to, just like with parenting, I suppose. And I've never been a parent, but where you're going to default to a certain way of doing things. You're going to default, and you're going to say, okay, now I'm a wife or a husband or whatever, and now I'm going to end up, you're going to kind of be repeating what dad did or what mom did or whoever those equivalent people were in your life. The way that you understand that relationship works, or the way that's the way you raise a child, or that's what you default to because you have no experience in it. And that's the thing with any kind of a change. We default to past behaviors or to what we've seen around, we imitate what we've seen around us because that's our understanding of it. When people talk about getting married, there's all kinds of things people have had. Now, mind you, okay, my own experience, I was married from 1994 to, I guess, legally till 2003. I left my spouse in 2001. So it's been a really long time since I've been married to anybody. And so I do have experience with marriage, unfortunately not a very good one, but that's where I get into the idea of wounding and inadequacy, because the expectations in those kinds of relationships, there's a whole lot to figure in, and the problem is it's not something always in your control because it's not just about you. When you come into a partnership with somebody, you may have an idea of how you want to approach things or what you expect out of the relationship. The person you're with, even if verbally they say, oh yeah, we're on the same page with this, you may find that once you're in the relationship that you're not on the same page. So it's always good to look at things like, so if there's somebody who is, if you have somebody who is very seriously like looked at family issues and done work and, things and separated themselves, and it depends on the age, depends on a lot of things, then you might feel that the family dynamic may or may not be as important. But oftentimes you do want to look to what that person's parents, what their relationship was like, to see what that person might default to. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will. Sometimes they'll do the opposite. Like if they felt their parents were too restrictive, they may be freer people, or, there's different things that happen. It's not necessarily a predictor, but it should be at least a point of discussion, right? Because I think a lot of times people still think of marriage as like, I'm in love with you and this just means our love affair is going to go on forever. Now, I suppose it could. But marriage is challenging. You're in the same space, and just like you have days where you look at each other and people might look at each other and think, "Oh, this is the most beautiful person." There can be days when you're both you're both feeling real ugly. It's just not. It's the real deal. It's you and them in a very real setting, and so it's not just a fantasy kind of a thing. You have to be aware that. You have to be in a space where you both feel like you really want to work together. I've noticed that a lot of people now are waiting, either not getting married or they're waiting a lot longer to do it. There's some people who think marriage can't work at all. I don't think that's necessarily true. But because obviously there are marriages that work. I mean, if I had my preference, okay, I would rather be in a stable married relationship if I was going to be with somebody. Dating different people is not my thing. I've always had this problem. Probably, and it's interesting, I talked about this on another live stream I did for my Katonia podcast yesterday, is that I always feel like there's men who come in, and a lot of it, and I said a lot of it depends on my hair color. Since I've been a redhead, or since I've been a blonde. When I was a blonde, I was born blonde, but I had really dark hair for a lot of years too. There's a way that people approach you. Like, people somehow think like, look at the red hair and think like, okay, you're dangerous and oversexed. And I'm like, I'm neither. I'm not, and I do, and I can't tell you how many times I've been approached by people who are already married or already in relationships and want to have a relationship, and I'm like, look, I don't do that. I don't play that. To me, it's like, there have been times in my life where I thought, oh, well, let me see, but it's not, there's no emotional satisfaction out of that, at least not for me. I don't know, in spite of the fact that people think I'm, because of my view on things, because I have no judgment about what people do with their personal lives. You can do whatever you want in the bed. I don't care. It's that's you. It's your life. But for my own personal thing, everybody thinks like I'm really like this wild person. I'm like, no, I'm actually quite conservative when it comes to that kind of stuff. And and I think it's an important factor in a relationship, but it's far from the only one. There's you have a whole, there's a whole relationship. It's like people who get very hung up on a wedding and don't realize there's a marriage afterwards. But to be fair, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on the fairy tale aspect of it and not on what the realities are. And it is a major shift. When I say this is like a rebirth of some kind, your old life is gone and now you're a different person when you get married. And you may go through a period of mourning the person that you were. You'll see that a lot of times if, like when I was first married, my spouse at the time was somebody. It's like we had a routine. We did certain things together. As soon as we got married, it was like all of a sudden he wanted to hang out with his friends again and didn't want me around. And it's like, it's because now that you're in the situation, now that you've done that, now you think like, oh, I want to go back to being, and it's like, you can't do that and have it survive. This person is part of your life now. And now again, it may depend on the net dynamic between you, but I find that people, and to a certain degree, you're still two independent people doing your thing. You just both have to have an understanding of what you expect out of a relationship, and you've got to be careful of too much of codependency. I think the way I had read it once, it might have been in the Book of Runes, was just kind of like, let the winds of heaven dance between you. You are together, and you are working towards something together, or you are supporting each other and being together, but you haven't just suddenly merged into being the same person. You are two separate people with separate things to offer to each other and to the world, and so you don't want to get married and say to a person, well, you're not gonna do this. You're not gonna, this job that you're not gonna do that job anymore. You're not gonna do this. You're not gonna do that. When you tell, especially if that's something that somebody's passionate about or they identify with, if you say, well, now you're married, now you can't do that anymore. If you're gonna shut off a whole aspect of a person and who they are, then it's not going to work. You have to respect the other person and respect everything about them. There may be things you like or don't like. There's always going to be something you like or don't like. And that kind of brings me a little bit to the topic of inadequacy. I know I've talked about it. I talked about comparison a couple of days ago. And this is really another version of that. Because sometimes we do put people on a pedestal. We see something that somebody does, and especially when you fall in love with somebody, you think like, oh, I can't measure up to that person. Okay, we have this thing of, we start comparing ourselves. But the thing that's happening there, now if you go by Jungian psychology, the thing that's happening there is that you are projecting your soul image onto that person. And the soul image is very, very complicated because the anima or animus, as they say. And as far as what genders, Jung would have said that the anima is the male soul and that the animus is the sort of the female soul. He didn't really have much regard for the animus, and the reason being that the animus has this element of being judgy. And he talks about it, and I've seen certain people read the passages in Jung on the animus, and they think, oh, well, see, this means he's misogynistic and woman-hating. And it's like, no, actually, he's not. His point is that what men need to develop, women already have naturally, in terms of being in connection with the soul. The reason they have to project their soul, and a lot of times onto whatever feminine is for somebody, because we're not in a time where we want to just say it's all heteronormative male-female relationships. There's people who have other kinds of relationships too, but there's still like a masculine-feminine element at play. As I've said, male and female, or masculine and feminine, are not exclusive categories. You know, they're not. It's not like, all masculine is all an aspect of all men, and femininity is an aspect of all women, based on their biology or whatever. Everybody has masculine and feminine elements. Okay, and I did a podcast on this on the Chtonia. The Instagram feed is Chtonia Podcast, one word, CHTHONIA podcast, one word. That live stream is still up, I think, on that page. Like if you click on it and slam on it one time. Same with this thing, by the way. If you're watching me and all of a sudden I stop talking, just hit your phone once and open it up in Reels, and you'll see the rest of it. But I also put it on YouTube. I have the Chtonia podcast channel, and then I have the Liminal Tarot channel. So those are the two places. But that particular one, I was talking about ideas about masculine and feminine strength. So I don't want to diverge again into the topic I covered yesterday. But okay. So there's the whole thing about marriage and the kind of transition that is. But even just getting into a relationship, there's that dance. There's that soul dance that goes on. Because you have projected your soul image, whatever it is, onto that other person. In some way, that person who you are attracted to is archetypally is meeting the archetype. It's activating the archetype. Okay, you're seeing that person, and you don't know what the archetype looks like. That's the whole point. The archetype is something mysterious. It's complicated, and the archetype of the soul is one that is where all your creative potential is. That's kind of like your source. That's your creativity. That's everything about you that makes you alive, makes you you, and makes you enjoy life. And as we just indicated earlier in this, the soul is an incredibly complicated structure or concept. You know, it's not something like, oh, you have this little energetic wisp in you that are going to float around after you die or something like that. It's that's more of a metaphorical construction. It's something a lot more complicated than that. But it's literally like you're seeing your living soul in another person. And immediately, now for women in particular, it can bring up feelings of inadequacy. That's why Jung talks about the judginess of it. There's I think it's John Beebe is his name, who does this. It was a piece called. It was about Alfred Hitchcock's film Notorious, and he talks about the drama of the anima. And he uses that film as an example where the main character, she's coming out of the courtroom where her father's on trial or whatever, and these reporters just move in on her, asking her like accusatory, all these questions. And then you see her like having, like a party, and people are having drinks and talking, and there's a guy in the corner who's kind of in shadow, and she's kind of half looking at him, half suspicious of him, half interested, is the way he conceived of it. And then at some point the camera angle turns and you see that she's now talking to the man over there, and it's just the two of them, and it's Cary Grant, who was considered to be really kind of that embodiment of the animus, like this really kind of sexy kind of figure. But she's not sure if like he's a police officer. She's not sure if he's somebody you can trust. She's half attracted to him, half suspicious of him. And that, and also the drama of the men kind of moving in a group, because the animus seems to function as a group in women. So it's almost like this, and it can be reflected in all kinds of places. There are women who can reflect their own animus onto other women when they start being judgy about, oh my God, did you see she did this, and you see she did that, and when or they start picking at, oh she looks fatter than yesterday, oh it's this, oh it's that. That's all animus driven stuff. That's the critic, and that's your inner critic, by the way. Your inner critic, your soul, there's an aspect of your soul that's also an inner critic, and that's the one that has to be integrated. You can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of that aspect of your soul. And it does actually serve a purpose. Sometimes that aspect of your soul is there to, when you are doing something that you need to legitimately be critiqued for, like, oh wait, but it often is out of control, and really it gets fueled by a need for control. So there's certain things that, techniques and things that I've done to say, okay, we need to diffuse the negative animus, But when you fall in love, that's the first thing that happens. And because your soul image is it's so wondrous, when you see it in that person is perfect. Everything they do is perfect. They look perfect, everything. And it doesn't matter who they are or what the reality is of who they are. Because eventually, if that's when that soul projection is withdrawn, and it has to be, there may be a projection that goes on, but to a certain degree, you have to take your own projections back and take responsibility for them and say, okay, no, well, this is really more about me than about them. And do you still love the person when they're not in the glamour of the soul projection, right? And if you don't, then that's usually when the relationship ends. So, because when you have a high expectation of somebody and say, oh, well, I think you're all of these things, and oh, well, maybe, or I have seen too the cases happen where they say, oh, well, now I've gotten what I want out of the situation. It's not as interesting to me anymore, because there's a complete unawareness of the projection that's going on there. And once you're just an ordinary person, then that sense of inadequacy, and then what can happen is the relationship can end, and that other person can start to have feelings of inadequacy. There's like a wounding there, like you don't actually love me for who I am. You love me for what you think I am, And that's I've often felt that the only way to really deal with that wound is to really be available, to be aware of the fact that that's what's going on. And it's funny, I saw some kind of a meme that somebody had posted that really made me laugh. And it was just the idea, they were talking about how, it was somebody had tweeted about, the kinds of things people need to sit down and discuss before they get in a serious relationship. And somebody said, back in the Victorian days, you have two women, who were not lesbians or whatever, writing to each other, I long to feel your sweet caresses and things like that. And he says, and now it's we want to talk about marriage like it's a parent-teacher conference. And that's the thing. You want to have the love and the spontaneity of it, but the reality of those relationships is that they require two people who love each other enough to work together. Probably the mythological thing that you would point to would be Bacchus and Philemon, which is in Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's a tale of it's Jupiter and Mercury, who are actually in the Greek would be Zeus and Hermes or Hermes, decide to travel in disguise to this one country of course this is very Roman, so really it is probably more Jupiter and Mercury, to go see whether the people are sufficiently honoring the gods, and whether or not people are honoring the rule of Xenia, which is of hospitality. So they would come as strangers to the door and ask for hospitality, and they were being turned away at every door, except for this poor couple who invited them in, and they only had a humble meal. They had one goose in their yard or whatever, and so they gave them whatever they could to make them comfortable in their poor household. And then when they realized they were in the presence, one of them did something, I can't remember now, and made them realize they were in the presence of the gods, and they were ready to go out and sacrifice their one goose, and they're like, no, don't do that. You're fine. They explained why they were there. They were like, we're looking to see, and really you're the only ones who have shown that you are, that you have this, it's a true caring for each other, and it's also therefore a true caring for other people. And where there's like an extension there. So basically the gods flooded out the rest of their neighbors and destroyed the village because they said, nope, they didn't observe the rules. So, and that's fun. And I say that that's very Roman because now we're getting into a period of the gods passing judgment, which is not always a thing. It can be, they can do very harsh things, but the idea is that, you didn't honor sufficiently. So, you're done. And so, but they say to Bacchus and Philemon, well, we'll give you anything. Now you can have anything that you want because, we'll grant you, it's like granting a wish. You can have what you want. And they said, well, all we've ever really wanted is we love each other and we just enjoy being together. And of course they're together just doing their day-to-day normal thing. They're not trying to be anybody. They're just themselves. And so they said, we want to be able to be together forever. So they grant the wish and they turn their house into this beautiful temple. They become the keepers of the temple of the gods. And then when their time comes to die, they turn into, I forget what type of tree it is, but they turn into two trees that kind of intertwine with each other. Because that's the way it works in these kind of metamorphoses. So, the point has to do with the fact that they have a generosity like to others and then to themselves. There's a love that's kind of genuine, that is not that goes beyond appearances and that goes beyond the superficial aspects of things. And it has to come from both sides. If one person is dumping everything into the relationship and the other person is indifferent, then that can wound too, because you think, well, that's completely out of your control. You can't make another person do something. Okay. So anyway, that's my thoughts. It is 7 o'clock, but I haven't done the reading yet, so I'll run a little bit over again today. And let's do our Osho Zen reading for the day. Okay, what do we got? Wow. We're already starting with a thunderbolt. Okay, so our first card is, literally Thunderbolt. This is the Tower card. This is about things getting shaken up. And again, in the context of what we are talking about here, this Tower has to do with an awakening that comes up, with something that, it's a flash of lightning that can bring an epiphany. It can bring a moment, an aha moment, where you wake up to something. It can also indicate something cataclysmic happening that shakes your foundation, but it's because it's almost testing the foundation. If your foundation is faulty, it's going to fall down. Certainly on the subject of wounding, one thing that's come up recently with Chiron in the solar eclipse in Chiron was conjunct Chiron. That's what I'm trying to say. I need another sip of coffee. So when we the solar eclipse that we had astrologically was conjunct Chiron, which is the wounded healer, and that is an asteroid. But Chiron is usually figured in when people do charts, because Chiron is where your wound is. Okay, that's the place where you feel vulnerable. And what I'm finding, not only for myself but for other people, again, between friends, clients, whatever, I'm not going to bring up any one specific situation. But there have been a lot of people who said it just feels like all of a sudden there's like a big outburst of everything that has been particular situations where maybe people have just kind of been going along, dancing around things, not really addressing certain issues, or maybe accepting a situation that maybe is not really very good for you. And I deal with that a lot with people. They may come to me and I may do a reading and I may say, well, this relationship you're in, this job you're in, I don't tell people what to do. I just say to them, there's some challenges going on there. There's some things you have to think about with regard to other aspects of your life, or where it is that what your goals are, where are you really trying to head, and where does this fit in? And really what I'm seeing is like, it's almost like my guides are saying, this person has to get out, like stop doing this. But I can't, I as a coach, that's not my job to say to somebody, you must stop doing this. I don't do that. I mean, I have I can be very authoritative and have strong opinions in that sense, but at the same time, I can't impose that on somebody. Somebody who says, look, I need to be here. No, I'm not ready for that. I can't tell that person, well, tough, you're going to have to be ready now. But oftentimes what's said is that if you can make the change yourself, or the universe will make it for you. If it's a direction, if you as the little wave are being carried this direction with the current, that's the way you're going to be going. All of us have a certain amount of free will, but we are also part of a larger system, and that larger system sometimes moves us into new places unexpectedly. That's really what the tower energy is. It's that shift. So any areas where we may be stubbornly clinging to something, to a past situation, or where we feel that we we have to fight and battle our way through something to maintain it, when things are when the wear is showing, when it's like, this may not be the best situation for us, then we have this thunderbolt that comes in and it not only illuminates things, but it might also tear things down for us. Now, the inner feeling, this is the unconscious part of the reading, is beyond illusion. Okay, this is the Judgment card. And Judgment says that, okay, this has to deal with things for people that Judgment, okay, when I see the Beyond Illusion card, it means you already know. Part of you, deep down inside, okay, you already know what needs to stay, what needs to go. You may be reluctant to let it go. You may say, well, yeah, I really should let this go, but, for right now, we do a lot of that kind of stuff. And I don't want to talk about it with any one particular situation, but the Beyond Illusion card is, it's a card, again, it's another card of awakening. So unconsciously, you have awakened to something. Consciously, we have the Outsider card. Okay, this is the other five, one of the other fives. And as you can see, there's this child who's like looking, there's this locked gate, and he's seeing like the rainbows on the other side and feels like he's locked out. And it's called the Outsider. And that is really the essence of the Five of Pentacles. It's the feeling that you are not part of a group, or you're not part of something. And that's when I talk about inadequacy. That's a piece of it. That's the sense that you are, I'm not accepted for who I am. I'm not part of this group. And the fact that there's a small child in here says that this can be a script that goes back not only to childhood, but potentially it could be even ancestral. It could be connected to, as I mentioned earlier, other soul aspects and things. There's this outsider energy. And so in other words, the message of that card is it's time to stop the tape, because you're not inadequate, and you do have a group, you do have a tribe, you do have people who support you, and maybe even the people who you think don't support you may perfectly well support you. So there's this idea of you are waking up to who maybe, maybe who your friends are and who they aren't, but who you are and where you're going. And it could just be that there's certain things you're doing in your life right now that are not proper to the person that you are right now, or you may be in certain situations where it's not sustainable. The center cannot hold, and it seems to be connected to that. Now, the advice it's giving is the Innocence card. Okay, this is the Sun in this deck, and it's showing this old man looking at a little grasshopper. And what it is it's the idea that, kind of going back to it's funny. This is the child who's left out in the cold. So in a way, this almost comes around to what people call inner child work. And really what it is getting back in touch with that sense of wonder and that sense of awe and that ability to look at everything through fresh eyes that you do as a child. I mentioned the other day about heliocentric astrology, and the fact that whatever your sun sign is, the sign opposite you in zodiac, is roughly 6 signs up. So if you're Aries, your opposite sign is Libra. If you're Taurus, it's Scorpio, and so on and so forth. Whatever your opposite sign is, that is a that particular, and sometimes you can look at it in terms of the nodal axes. You can look at a chart and see what they are. that represents what your inner child is, or what your earth sign is usually, what you might have been like as a child, how you may have presented to the world until some kind of wounding and some kind of change. And wounding happens all the time. We can't really get away from it. But whether it be things that we learn in school, whether it's the process of socialization, the way that we start to put things in shadow and say, oh, okay, it's okay for me to be this way, but not okay for me to be this way. How are we negotiating those kinds of things? And it makes us into a very different kind of adult. For example, I'm on the Taurus-Scorpio axis, and so my childhood would have been more Scorpio. And when I was reading a book on heliocentric astrology, and I was reading about that, I was like, yeah, that's actually spot on. Because as a child, I was they said the Scorpio child's really imaginative and can really like visualize everything, plays at everything, thinks everything is possible. And then gradually they're kind of shamed out of that as they get older, and then they turn into the Taurus adult, who of course is, very practical and very sensible, and kind of gets into this mode of, well, we need to be realistic and keep our feet on the ground all the time. Now, to a certain extent, that may be true. We need a balance of, but we may do it to an extent that we completely shut that out. And so this may be just saying, look, you want to go back to that stage when you still didn't have all these hangups. You kind of want to try to get back to that place and the energy that you had there, whatever that is for you. If you're on the Aries-Libra axis, the Libra child is somebody who's very chatty and very talkative and wants to be friends with everybody. And the first time they feel they feel that they're either not paid attention to or dismissed or an outsider, then that's where the wound starts, and they kind of start to reserve themselves or withdraw or pull back or whatever. Yeah, it's interesting. Heliocentric astrology is really interesting. At least, that's just one little piece of it, but that earth sign thing is a very interesting thing. So I feel like there's definitely a message here about getting back to that, and our outcome here is receptivity. So this is Queen of Cups energy. This is about allowing yourself to receive information from your inner voice, information from nature, from the outside, allowing yourself to be vulnerable to some degree. Because, and I think just to sum up, because you're almost at 7:15 here, but, and honestly, now there might be people on this live stream. I've noticed now on Instagram that it's not showing me who's live. It didn't do it yesterday with Catonia. It did do it yesterday with this one, but it didn't do it with Catonia. So I have no idea. There could be nobody on. There could be 20 people on. I have no idea right now. And if any of you have been messaging me, I apologize, because I have to figure out what's going on. But for some reason, it's not showing me who's on the live stream. So anyway, it's just to kind of sum up when I talk about the receptivity. Yeah, when it comes to people we care about, or even in situations where we are trying to get into a relationship, or we're trying to negotiate a longer term relationship, or somebody who is in a long-term relationship trying to negotiate, I feel like there's a strong element. We operate in our relationships with people from the place of wounding. So a lot of times we're distrustful of people that we meet. We think, yeah, this is going to be, I know men, this is going to be another one that's going to do this, or vice versa. The man may look at the woman and say, oh, I've been with all these different women and this is what they did. So, this next one I've met, she seems good, but she's going to be just the same. And the reality is, it says no. It's saying, like, you're never going to get anywhere doing that. You kind of have to be vulnerable. You have to open up to some degree. And that's very, very scary, because we don't want to be wounded again. But, and again, if there's, so you have to, so there's this delicate thing of trying to distinguish between what is your past wounding that's going on here, and what is, and what is just you not, continually reliving the wound from the past and not healing it. Because the only way to heal it really is to take the risk and to say, okay, I'm going to try to be vulnerable again and try to make this work. And probably every time it happens, if you've reflected on it, then that gives you a new understanding of people and situations. So the more mature you get, the older you get, the wounding might still take a different form. It doesn't mean that if something happens and let's just say you take a risk on somebody and get rejected, it doesn't mean that that's not going to hurt. But it's, but the point too is that you may not be rejected. Sometimes we just automatically assume our inadequacy, and it's saying, well, you're not you're not really inadequate. And it's and not everybody. You're not necessarily the answer. This because this is literally stop the tape. Like, don't stop the recording. Don't keep playing over and over again. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I don't belong. I'm not worthy. And I feel like recent events have kind of shaken things up to try to make you realize this. Or you may have been challenged in a way where you could either act from a point of defensiveness or you could act from a point of love. So if that fits for you, then yeah, the message here is definitely opening up more, allowing yourself to feel more, to be more vulnerable, to take more risks with your heart, because that's the only way in which you can actually move into that space, as difficult as that is. So I'm going to stop for now. If people have been watching and Instagram has not been showing it to me, which did happen yesterday with my other live stream, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. And of course, if you're watching me later on the recording, or if you're watching me on YouTube, again, I do hope that this reading resonates with you for today, and that this some of these thoughts actually could be helpful in the things that you're dealing with right now. Everybody have a great Tuesday. I will be back tomorrow morning, possibly at 7. I'll see about refiguring it. And so take care. Have a wonderful day.